Jai everyone and welcome you back. So you are doing international organization for a few last few modules, you can say. I think from the last week I am dealing with the international organizations. Already I talk about the League of Nations, the failure of League of Nations, then the evaluation of United Nations organizations, UN Charter, the Millennium Goal. Then you can say already I talked about the UN organs, all the organs in a very detailed form. Then also I talked about UN agencies, right? So now we are going to discuss about the reforms in United Nations organizations, right? And in the reforms also in the previous class I talked about, if you can say in terms of the reforms, I was talking about the reforms within, that is otherwise known as, just a minute, just give me a minute. So we have discussed about the reforms, just a minute, let me take your PPT, right, great, right. So previously already I talked about that basically there are two kinds of reforms that UN has to face, you can say. And even I talk about the reformations and the counter reformation, both the thing also. The reformations and counter reformations, that by forcefully you can say the environment or the situation, you can force them to go for the reforms. And counter reformations, we ourselves, you can say कि अपने आप को हम reforms करना शुरू कर देते हैं. Anyway, so reforms of the organizational structure and processes. I was talking about the reforms of the organizational structures and process में क्या reforms होंगे. And that's already I talk about organizational structure में क्या क्या आता है. There you can say all the organs, you can say General Assembly, Security Council, ICJ, Trusteeship Council, ECOSOC and the Secretariat, and even agencies also. Also I discuss a little about during the Cold War and the post-Cold War, the challenges are different. During the Cold War, immediately just after you can say just succeeded to the Second World War, there was the need for the peaceful tranquility to be maintained across the world. But in the post-Cold War, and at that time there are two superpower and there was a fight between these two, so that United Nations organization acted become a sandwich, दोनों के बीच में sandwich बन जाता था. Then in the post 1991, and during that particular period of time, the world was divided into bipolarizations. Bipolar world was there. But in the post-Cold War scenario, in the post-1991 scenario, the world either in a unipolar world or a multipolar world, so that the challenges are different. And in spite of going for all those, you can say, peace and peaceful coexistence in the world, at the same time, United Nations Organization, the major objective at present, you can say, is to look after the culture, education, health, and other infrastructure and other development, trade and other development in the world. So like that, the reforms being keep on changing as per the need of the time and passes of the time. So the first one, the reforms of the organization, structure and processes, right? And on the other hand, the second one which I am going to discuss, that is a review of the issues that fall within the jurisdiction. One is the structure and process, and the second one the jurisdiction of the organization, right? So in the reform, structure and processes, the biggest discussion has been the functioning of the Security Council. Yesterday also I was talking about. 1945 से Security Council is having 15 members, 10 non-permanent and 5 are permanent members. And till date it had not been changed. Though the UN Charter is not static, it's very flexible and keep on changing. It's a lively document. You can say keep on changing as per the need. But unfortunately, in last 75 years, the permanent membership has not been extended, not been increased. And if you can see in the permanent membership, yesterday when I was talking about, there was no country from Africa, no country from Latin America got the permanent membership. And Asia said to be one of the largest continent, and only China is the only the permanent member in the Security Council. So that the Security Council has to be expanded, right? In particular, there is proposal to increase membership from Asia, Africa and South America. I was talking about. Beyond this, US and the other Western countries want to improve the UN budgetary procedures and the administration also. So not only that, to increase the member of UN Security Council, and the extension has to be given to the African nations, then Latin American countries, and a few more membership to even Asian country. And India is also in that particular horse race, that to become the permanent member of the Security Council. India also, you can say that particular horse race. Japan, India, South Africa, then Brazil, these are all these countries you can say in that horse race, to get the permanent membership in the Security Councils too, right? Go to the next. On the issues to be given the greater priorities or to be brought within the jurisdiction of the UN, some countries and experts want that organizations to play greater or more role in the peace and security mission, while the other want that. See, this is there is a contradiction of opinion. Already I discussed yesterday. कुछ चाहते हैं कि world peace, the UN, the basic objective of or the work of the UN should be, to maintain world peace. Other wants that no. There is no need for the world peace now, because each and every country, they knew it very well that they have to maintain the peace and tranquility across the world. So that most of the country, they also wanted that let United Nations organization, such type of organization work for the humanitarian work. So what type of humanitarian work that United Nations organization has to work? The humanitarian works you can say include health, education, environment, population control, human rights, gender equality and social justice, right? So after the Cold War, those realities are different. Here some of these changes that occurs, already I told about. The US, the Soviet Union collapsed 1991. The US is the strongest power. The relationship between Russia, the successor of the Soviet Union, and the US is much more cooperative. China is first emerging as a great power, and India is also a growing economy in the world. The economies of the Asia are growing at an unprecedented rate. Many new countries have joined United Nations organizations as they become independent from the Soviet Union and the former communist states from the Eastern Europe. Already I told you that 15 CIS, after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, it divided into 15 countries, and those countries now become the members of United Nations organization. A whole new set of challenges confront the world, that's genocide, civil war, ethnic conflicts, terrorism, nuclear proliferations, climate change, environmental degradations and the epidemic. These are all the issues that now the United Nations organization, they are supposed to work. In these situations of 1989 Cold War, and now the situation has changed, and if you can go through, is UN doing enough? These are all the very contradictory questions to be asked. You can say, kya UN enough काम कर रहा है? Human wants are unlimited always. Yes, if you can see that in last 75 years, it worked praiseworthy. The works being calculated in terms of very praiseworthy works being done by United Nations organization. Lot many works being done by United Nations organization in each and every field. At least it succeeded to control the Third World War, to stop the Third World War. That is very important. Is it equipped to do what is required? These are all the things already I discussed, you can see in my previous class, right? Now, reforms of the structures and the processes. While the case for reforms was widespread support, getting agreement on what to do is difficult. Let's examine the debate over the reforms of the UN Security Council 1992. The UN General Assembly adopted a resolutions, and the resolutions reflected three main complaints. Number one, the Security Council no longer represent the contemporary political realities, because in the Security Council there was no members from Africa, no member from South America, right? And only one member from the huge Asian country, so that it not truly represents the contemporary political situations. A decision reflects only the Western values and the interests, and are dominated by a few power. This is very true. The five important the veto countries, you can say, or the permanent members of the UN Security Council. Apart from that, the countries those who are economically prosperous, only they had the values, you can say, in United Nations organizations, and they had a great influence on all the work of United Nations organizations. That's why a decision reflect only the Western values and interest, and more or less it's being dominated by only a few countries, handful of country, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 country जो चाहते हैं यूनाइटेड नेशंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वही करते हैं. What about the rest of the 190 country? It's like equitable representation. This is very true. Giving very simple example, yesterday even my previous class even I was talking about that 195 members countries are there, right? And a few of the members, they are having huge authority and the powers in the United Nations organization, few members country, and few of them they don't have any authority at all. So the representation is not equal, so that it should have equitable representation. In view of this growing demand for restructuring of United Nations organization, on 1st January 1997, the then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan initiated an inquiry into how the UN should be reformed. United Nations organization को reforms कैसे किया जाए? How, for instance, should UN Security Council members be chosen? फॉर एग्जाम्पल यू कैन से यूएन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल का मेंबर्स को कैसे चूज किया जाए. Even the non-permanent members, those 10 non-permanent members are now being chosen, you can say, being elected, and their zone-wise election होता है. Even in my previous modules, I told that, but 21 से लेकर 23 तक के लिए, India is being nominated as the members of UN Security Council, non-permanent members of the UN Security Council. In the years since then, the following are just some of the criteria that have been proposed for a new permanent and non-permanent members of the Security Council. Means now, on the basis of that 1997 the proposal, you can say the regulation being passed, and आगे का UN Security Council में permanent and non-permanent members का nominations कैसे होगा, on what criteria? Number one, need to be very major economic power in the world. Your GDP needs to be very good, and major economic power, you can contribute a lot for United Nations organizations in the different agencies and the organs. A major military power, definitely, so that you can help across the world. A substantial contributor to the UN budget, financial contributor of even United Nations organization को होना होगा. That's why those big nations, 5, 6, 10 big nations, they are having more authority and power. A big nation in terms of your populations, like India, China, big nation in terms of the population also, it matters a lot, because major industrial development or other development will be taking place in the country like that. A nation that respects democracy and human rights, this is I think very important, because the very true value of United Nations organization is democracy, setting up the democracy. So that country must respect democracy and human rights. A country that would make the council more representative of the world diversity in terms of geography, economic system and culture. So these are 6 main criteria that how a country become the members of UN Security Council, either permanent or non-permanent member. This criteria has to be taken into account. It means now if any of the country they wanted to become the member of UN Security Council, either permanent or non-permanent member, क्या क्या होना होगा? Economic power होना होगा, military power होना होगा, UN budget का main contributor होना होगा, good population होना चाहिए, democracy होना चाहिए, human rights का violation ना हो, or to respect the human rights, that's very important. And in terms of geography, economic system and culture, cultural diversity होना है, world diversity को accept कर पाए. Like the country like India, we are, it's a diversified country. Unity in diversity, you can see in unity in diversity, and we do each and everything. हमारा जो existence, हमारा जो system, हमारा जो culture, हमारा जो language है, it's a very diversified. So if you can see in all these 6 points, you can say, I too feel that India is eligible to become the permanent member, because it already shows that if you are eligible to become the non-permanent member, why not permanent member? Because these 6 points are similar. See, this is very important. Dear student, these 6 points are for what? For not for non-permanent member. This is for permanent member or non-permanent both. न्यू परमानेंट मेंबर एंड नॉन परमानेंट मेंबर बनने के लिए ये 6 क्राइटेरिया आप फुलफिल कर पाते हो. तो अगर हम ये 6 क्राइटेरिया फुलफिल किए हैं तभी हम नॉन परमानेंट मेंबर भी बने हैं 2021 से लेकर 2023 तक के लिए. इट मीन्स यू आर एलिजिबल टू बिकम द परमानेंट मेंबर यूएन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल टू, राइट. Coming to next, right. How was the matter of representations to be resolved? Did equitable representation in geographical? These are all these questions you can say that needs to be addressed by United Nations Organization. Did equitable representation in the geographical term means that there should be one seat for Asia, Africa, Latin America and Caribbean? Can be, and this should be. Otherwise equitable distribution कैसे होगा? अफ्रीका इतना ह्यूज कॉन्टिनेंट है, वहाँ से कोई परमानेंट मेंबर्स ही नहीं है. एशिया इट्स द लार्जेस्ट कॉन्टिनेंट और सिर्फ एक ही मेंबर है. लैटिन अमेरिका इट्स वेरी वेल डेवलप्ड कॉन्टिनेंट, कोई रिप्रेजेंटेशन ही नहीं है. कैरिबियन कंट्री से एक रिप्रेजेंटेशन. सो लाइक दैट यू कैन से at least there should be equitable representation from each and every area. Should the representation on the other hand be by regions or sub-regions rather the continents? ये क्या जाता है regions sub-regions के हिसाब से तो क्या ही जाता है, but continent के term में भी जाना चाहिए regions. So these are all the questions to be addressed and the discussion is continuously going on these questions. Why should the issue of equitable representation be decided by ecography or geography? जोग्राफिकल लोकेशन के हिसाब से क्यों किया करना चाहिए? बिकॉज द कंट्री फ्रॉम, सपोज अगर अफ्रीका से साउथ अफ्रीका को मिलता है परमानेंट मेंबरशिप, देन साउथ अफ्रीका इज गोइंग टू रिप्रेजेंट द एंटायर अफ्रीकन कॉन्टिनेंट, एंड कहीं ना कहीं अफ्रीका में साउथ अफ्रीका का कल्चर देखेंगे तो अफ्रीकन का हर कंट्री के साथ कल्चर से कुछ ना कुछ मेल तो जरूर खाता होगा, सिमिलरिटी जरूर होंगे, तो दे कैन बेस्ट रिप्रेजेंट देयर ओन कॉन्टिनेंट, राइट? दैट्स व्हाई कॉन्टिनेंट वाइज और जोग्राफिकल लोकेशन इकोग्राफी के हिसाब से अगर भी हो, जियोग्राफी के हिसाब से, जोग्राफी सॉरी इट्स जोग्राफी एक्चुअली, जोग्राफी के हिसाब से अगर हो तो हार्डली इट्स मैटर. व्हाई नॉट बाय द लेवल्स ऑफ इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट? क्या इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट के हिसाब से होना चाहिए? माइट इज राइट, यस, इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट के हिसाब से भी इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट कैन बी अ क्राइटेरिया, बट इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट शुड नॉट बी अ सोल क्राइटेरिया टू बिकम द मेंबर ऑफ यूनाइटेड नेशंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. सोल क्राइटेरिया नहीं हो सकता इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट, राइट? कैन बी ए क्राइटेरिया. इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट होना चाहिए, सोशल डेवलपमेंट उस कंट्री में होना चाहिए, डेमोक्रेटिक कंट्री होना चाहिए, राइट? कल्चरल डाइवर्सिटी होना चाहिए, गुड कंट्रीब्यूटर इन टर्म्स ऑफ द डिफेंस एंड मॉनिटरी अफेयर्स होना चाहिए. देन ओनली ओवरऑल everything has to be looked after before you can give the permanent members or the non-permanent members to any of the country across the world. Why not, in the other words, give more seats to the members of the developing world? What about culture? This is also a big question, because the developing country, the third world country, they consisting the largest number of the population or the largest number of the countries altogether. So why not the more seat can be given to these people? But again here the question arises. Seat cannot be given in terms of the developed or the non-developed, underdeveloped or developing in terms of the economy. Already I explained that 6 criteria being set up. Economy is not the only criteria through which the permanent or the non-permanent members seat can be given to any of the country. It can be, you have to take military, you have to take it as a big contributors of military and of finance, then population, need to be a democratic country, cultural diversity, lot many things are supposed to be looked after while you are going to give or nominate a particular country as the permanent or the non-permanent members of United Nations Security Council. Should different culture or civilizations be given representations in more balanced way? Why not? It can be. It can be given in a more balanced way, that different culture and civilizations, each and every civilization across the world must represent in that particular chamber, in that particular house, so that it will be equitable distributions. How does one divide the world by civilizations or culture, give that nations have so many cultural streams within their own boundaries? That's why it talks about unity and diversity. The country needs to be a very diversified country, right? कोई अगर एक ही इथनिक कम्युनिटी का हो या लिंग्विस्टिक ग्रुप का हो तो इट्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट, यू कैन से. इवन द कंट्री लाइक इंडिया इज अ रेनबो कंट्री. ऐसा कोई रिलीजियस कम्युनिटी नहीं होगा जो इंडिया में ना हो, ऐसा कोई लैंग्वेज नहीं होगा दुनिया का जो इंडिया में नहीं बोला जाता हो. You'll surprise that in India itself, the indigenous language, there are 1562 languages, different culture, different food habits. So this is what otherwise known as the cultural diversity that can be seen. This already yesterday already I talked about. Come to the next point, and which is again very important, you can say that jurisdiction of UN. So the first reforms already I talked about, the first reform, that is structural reforms, and the second reform he talks about the jurisdiction of United Nations Organization. Even United Nations Organization का जो jurisdiction है, the extension the rights है, the extension of rights जहाँ जहाँ जो काम करता है उसमें क्या बदलना चाहिए, क्या क्या चीज़ें को उसमें हम बदला जा सकता है, right? So the question of membership is a serious one, and in addition, though there are more substantial issues before the world, as United Nations has completed 60 years in 2005, I'm talking about, celebrated the anniversary to review the situation, and today they have completed 75 years of its own existence. So the leaders in this meeting decided the following steps should be taken to make United Nations Organization more relevant in the changing context. So it's 10 years back, you can say 15 years back, these decisions already being taken. 2005, 15 years back, the decisions already being taken that what changes has to be made in terms of the jurisdictions of United Nations Organization. Number one, creation of peace building commission. Though already you are having the peacekeeping operations, peacekeeping forces, those who work across the world, जहाँ पे भी कोई परेशानी होता है, UN peacekeeping operation or the force will usually go there. Acceptance of the responsibility of the international community in case of failure of national government to protect their own citizens from atrocities. This is very important. In case of any of the countries, there is changing, you can say, transaction of the governmental system, you can say, or the political system, take over by any of the military or someone else, you can say. In that case, the international community or the United Nations organization has to take the responsibility to protect that government and the citizens from the atrocities. And उनका economic development, political development, बाकी सब करना जरूरी है, करना चाहिए. And for that only you are having trusteeship council. Establishment of Human Rights Council, operational since 19 June 2006. This is in operation now. Agreement to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, already I discussed in my second modules. Those Millennium Development Goals 15, 17, the Millennium Development Goals has to be achieved at anyhow. Condemnation of the terrorism in all forms and manifestations. Now terrorism is not being confined to a particular country or particular state. It's an international threat, and across the globe you can find out the terrorist attack or the terrorists are the present. So that it's a major issue that each and every national country, each and every country, it's the duty of United Nations organizations to control, curb terrorism. Creation of democracy fund, to establish democracy, किसी country में democracy establishment करना हो तो एक उसके लिए fund creation होना चाहिए. So from that particular fund, that particular country can be helped and the aid can be given to them. An agreement to wind off the trusteeship council. It is not hard to see that in this. This is very true. An agreement already being signed, you can say that. So that the trusteeship council, already I told you that trusteeship council don't have any relevance now. Trusteeship council का relevance almost खत्म हो गया है, right? Because अब कोई भी ऐसे country नहीं बच गया जो कि independent country ना हो, and colonial rule में कहीं हो कोई country, ऐसा कोई country नहीं रह गया. So जब वो country नहीं है तो trusteeship council का कोई existence ही नहीं है. So these are all these, you can say, the reforms. If you can talk about the reforms, one is the structural reforms, the within the organization what structural reforms has to be done, and the second one is the jurisdiction, how the jurisdictions of United Nations organization has to be expanded across the different segment of the work. It may be defense, it may be democracy, establishment of democracy, it may be scientific temper, cultural aspects, the citizenship, then health, education, each and every respect, how these things has to be looked after. This is very important. So this is what you can say that we talks about the reforms of United Nations organization. What are the reforms that United Nations organizations they wanted to go for? So the last two topics left out, you can say, which I'll be discussing in the next modules. That is India and United Nations organization. One is India and United Nations organization. That's the topic left. And at the same time, India and the UN reforms, and the UN as a unipolar world. These are the two topics left out. So I'll be taking one more class to complete this. After that, I'll be sending you the notes and the question and answer of this particular chapter. Right? Till then, please go for the research. See, my dear students, unless you can make lots and lots of research, because book में जो भी दिया है वो पुराने data है. So you have to go for the research, and you have to Google. And we will be getting many informations what United Nations organization is doing at present. Cold War का situation में क्या करता है and post Cold War का situation में क्या करता है. Even today, if you can go just search, you can say that through WHO, World Health Organizations, during this pandemic, what is the role of United Nations organization? You will surprise the amount of work United Nations organization is doing across the year, right? Though still you can say United Nations organization is a puppet of a few most powerful nation of the world, and कहीं ना कहीं उसका मजबूरी है, because they are the major contributors to United Nations organization. तो सुनना पड़ता है, थोड़ा बहुत biased होना होता है, but it's not like that it's absolutely biased and not doing any philanthropic work, or you can say the humanitarian work. They are. That's why please go for a little bit of research. We'll find it out that during this pandemic, what is the role of United Nations organizations through WHO. That's all for today's class. Thank you. Stay at home, stay safe, and please study as much as you can. Make notes, and though already I used to send question and answer and the notes, if you can get it printed, it's okay. There is no need to write it down, right? I used to send ample amount of notes and the question and answers, so that let it be printed in a printed form also. You can keep it, else you can write it down. Okay, thank you, take care, all the best.